Well, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm Guy Osa, and we have saved the best for last. We have some subject matter experts in our field in security that we've known for maybe over 20 to 25 years. So we'd like to have an open forum. We'd like everyone to participate. And we're going to kick it off with Peter Vogt. Peter has also been in the world of security for 25 years. So
too long.
Without further ado, Mr. Vogt.
Hey, thank you, everyone. And hey, thanks for attending today. It was a great day. And reason I'm moderating is I do a lot with OWASP and the Cloud Security Alliance and other associations, so I like to stay involved. It's always a good thing to do. One, thank you for our panel members. We've got a lot of experience sitting in front of us today. The topic basically today is pretty straightforward. What's the future of cybersecurity, risk management, and threat management? Risk mitigation and threat management. The folks that are helping us today: Peter Rosario, 12 years experience in information security analysis, information security policy design, currently with an ISO at USI, helping design security programs. A lot of experience, a lot of good knowledge to discuss with us today. Ken, how do you say your last name? Pfeil. Executive Managing Director for Arrow Consulting, also been Chief Security Officer at numerous companies, including MFS Investments, was a CISO at Pioneer Global, in charge of not just Pioneer Global here in the U.S., but 26 countries. Very important position there. Stephen Johnson, experience in cybersecurity, executive and Doctor of Science, candidate in the practice of cybersecurity and an expert in cyber risk management and strategy. Right here. Sorry I didn't get any cards for everybody here. I apologize. And Dr. Edward Amoroso, distinguished cybersecurity expert, many years at AT&T, now and author of many books, and now with his own consulting firm called Tag Cyber. And Aaron Michelle, thank you for filling in today. Aaron Michelle is a CISO at a company called Multiplan. So we're going to keep this very interactive and very informal. So I think Tom Osa has a mic. So we have a lot of interesting topics to discuss, so we might not get to them all. But we're going to start somewhat broader. This abstract was written just last week by a CIO of a Fortune 50, and it's nice to see that the CIOs at some of these larger companies are paying attention to risk management. I was thrilled to see his input, and so we passed out, so we don't have to get into all this. We passed it out. Have a read. We're going to focus mostly on a number of broader questions. Please interject if you have specific questions, and then if we do have time, we'll get into some more specific areas of security. So some of the questions we're going to start off with, and I'm going to stay quiet over here so we can get as much input from our panel as we can today in the short hour that we have. The first question that we're going to talk about is, what are CISOs doing to foster a greater organizational awareness, understanding, and focus on threat management, the security maturity model, and in what capacity are CISOs leveraging industry reports? Do these reports actually help elevate awareness, such as the Verizon data breach investigative report, which we see every year, and other tools that they use to elevate awareness to the board of directors? And I thought I'd start here at this end of the panel.
Sure.
And work our way down.
All right. To elevate awareness, I've got a security awareness program that goes out to all staff members. There's a monthly newsletter that goes out. Whenever any major advisories come out from Microsoft, Cisco, any of the above, I send those out to the staff. Any chance I get to get in front of the audit group or any of the other executives, I do give them a little bit of FUD. Using some of the reports, the Verizon reports, I'll pick one or two things out just to scare them and keep them on their toes. In general, that's it. I don't want to bombard them with too much data because then they're just going to become numb to it. So every once in a while, I'll just drop little nuggets when I get the chance to. And depending on the group, I'll join different groups at lunchtime just to be able to bring up security and evangelize it as much as I can.
So this month, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's a thing pretty much everyone in this room knows. So I hired the very finest red team I could find to torment my entire company for a solid month to see who gives it up. And I put the departments against one another. And whoever wins is going to get, something that makes sense. And it's going to be fun because it really raises awareness. It creates the competition. And I think everyone is kind of excited about it. So that's been really one of the key pieces of awareness. I do, of course, phishing exercises. And the industry reports I find are great for, you have to comb through them and then you'll find a really fantastic metric that you can just throw in when you're casually doing a presentation. And I think it helps people understand it's not just you're the crazy paranoid person in the room, that actually other people that are relevant are thinking and talking about this. And it's not just us experiencing it, it's the industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, for me, being a CISO or just really in the practice of information security or cybersecurity, I always kind of look at myself as a teacher as well, because we deal with a lot of subject matter that isn't kind of easily consumed by people who are not technical in nature, that might be business facing. So for me, it's really important to try to communicate that information in such a way that really kind of answers for me what I kind of call the so what question. In my particular organization and in some organizations I've worked with in the past, we've had, a threat intelligence function that is actively looking to see what types of information can we consume as an organization. And kind of one of the things I keep in the back of my mind before I send it kind of upstairs or even across the aisle is, does this information really have value and does it answer that so what question? And for me, I do that in a couple ways. First, you have to be able to communicate technical and non-technical so the business understands. Mm-hmm. Second, you have to actually get to information that they want to consume. So if they don't want it, it's going to go in the trash can. And for me, I'm always cognizant of not being too noisy, but not being quiet as well. You have to balance that very delicately. And then third, I always like to have it actionable, right? So, we had mentioned phishing. We do phishing exercises, and when we do it, we kind of seize that teachable moment opportunity to, if somebody does click through a link on a phishing exercise, for example, we let them know, hey, it's a phishing exercise, you've been caught, and then we direct them immediately to kind of a landing page where it has kind of some pro tips about protecting yourself and the organization around phishing, and then also a link to our phishing training that we have. So I think, kind of following those three principles, having it, be very concise and purpose-driven, have it being consumable, and having it kind of be at a moment in time where it can be leveraged by the business is ultimately, what's going to make you successful.
Are those phishing attacks seem to be getting better and better and better every week? Hard to sometimes distinguish between a real email and a phishing attack to me.
Yeah, I would say if somebody's looking for a solution to prevent phishing, it doesn't exist. And I would say don't underestimate the carbon factor in security. And for me, that goes both ways. That could be your greatest pitfall, but it could also be your greatest benefit as well.
A CISO told me yesterday, he's like, advanced persistent threats, I'm still trying to just deal with phishing issues. So obviously it's a big issue still. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're kind of hitting on a common theme here. If there's one thing that any of you in this room take away from this particular part of the conversation, it's 3 words: dumb it down, please. Sharpen up your crayons and speak to the folks in a language that they understand, which is common language. If you pop the propeller up on top of your head, you're not going to get very far with your business. You're not going to get very far with most of the folks in the room. To kind of allude a little bit more on the phishing, it's not just always phishing that's going to get you either. We had a case a little while back where we had the autonomy archiving system. Compliance goes through there and it just blindly opens up attachments from time to time just to as part of their job. So very quickly you can have something turn from nothing to a full-fledged house on fire in a matter of minutes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the best thing that you can do is understand your target audience, understanding the message that you're trying to convey, and doing that in a way that relates to their business. And for that, you've got to understand their business, and you've got to understand how they work day to day.
Well, first of all, I agree with the point that if you're trying to communicate with somebody, you have to communicate in terms they can understand. Here's the problem with security awareness programs. I think I've been doing it now for 25, 30 years, and I've tried everything across a lot of different businesses. And so on video, social, viral, standing on my head, drawing cartoons. Here's the problem. Let's say you are a sailor getting on a ship to go, you're part of the Navy and you're off for a month or something. They're going to hand you a card that says, here are 8 things you can do that you can understand that'll keep you safe on the ship. And they're basic common sense. And you read them and you go, oh, and there's stats that show you do these 8 basic things and 99% of the problems go away. The problem that you all have and that we all have is that there is no such thing for cyber. And I totally agree, like the dumbing it down. Like I sit on a board of directors now in a large bank. So the stuff that gets brought to you is almost like treats you as if you've suddenly, your IQ has dropped 500 points. Like, oh my gosh, you're a board member, so I have to talk in baby terms. I don't think that that's right. And the problem is that the solution to cybersecurity is not simple stuff. It's really hard stuff, and it's hard to do awareness. So you got to do awareness, but you have to recognize that if you're like in a walk, like crawl, walk, run kind of environment, crawl stuff is like basic compliance and so on. Walk is maybe technology, behavior analytics, bring tools, and run is redesigning your architecture, doing micro-segmented cloud workload and a high blah, 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 blah. How do you explain that to a C-suite manager? They don't. But that's what solves the problem, and that's the conundrum that you have with awareness. That yes, doing awareness, what the guys are saying, that's how you do it. But I question whether awareness is really going to take a very big bite out of the pie. It'll take a little bit, and you have to do it. But if any of the people in here are relying on security awareness to stop cyber attacks, then you better go get 3 envelopes.
Quick kind of staying on the same topic, but segueing to another kind of consideration. There's been a process of change in security from, and it's always difficult to get folks to think about security not in a static kind of fashion. It's a continuous thing that we all need to think about every day. But at the same time, on many aspects of our enterprise, we're talking about continuous monitoring, continuously, the speed at which business is operating. My question, as a follow-up on this topic of awareness, are users, our executives, are the folks, the employees aware that the speed of which attacks are occurring, the speed of the business is actually making security even more difficult? Is there an awareness that we're moving to a much more dynamic, fast-paced model where they have to be even more aware? I'm just curious if they understand. We always had a difficulty trying to move them from static thought process about security to a much more continuous perception of it. Any comments on the speed at which we're being attacked and speed of business?
I'll take a first whack at that. I mean, I think for me that's the importance of an information security organization having a pretty clearly defined vision and mission statement and strategy. And for me, the strategy is to support the business in growth and development. And so I would immediately ask the question of, are the business goals and objectives accurately communicated to the organization? And is your information security strategy or your cybersecurity strategy aligned in tandem with that? Many organizations, because of the pace at which business moves, is not quite there yet. They're playing catch up to try to just cover the basics to be able to get to a point where you're in line with the business strategy. So for me, it goes hand in hand.
What do you do about that? The security is always a little bit behind. They're not going to not release the software rev because security hasn't finished the audit. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And what do you do in that case? Any
it's as much as you're a teacher, in many ways you're a politician, and you have to build relationships with your business partners because, as was mentioned, a lot of times these complex things aren't communicated very clearly, and it's difficult to consume. But I think if you have solid relationships with your business partners and a good oversight governance steering committee that includes those business partners as it comes to information security, when there are questions as to why are things moving at a certain pace or why are investments being made in one area but not the other, you've got kind of that body to be able to point back to and say, well, the business has chosen this is a higher priority than that, and that's where we're putting our resources.
Who are CISOs reporting to these days, and are you being invited to executive meetings? It's a great question, and it hasn't. I haven't liked the answer in many years, but we can start with you.
So I report into the CIO at the moment, which when I began in the security business, it was reporting into the CTO. So this is a great improvement. And I think the reason that I continue to get invited to all these important meetings is the single best trick I've got is tabletop exercises. And I invite the entire executive team and all the business leads, and I show them just how things can escalate, and I show them just what can happen. And that also addresses the idea of the ever-evolving risks, which is because every time we do a new tabletop exercise, I show just how the newest trend and how it was different from a year ago when we did it before. That brings everyone on board, and it makes everyone understand kind of how everything fits in and why we need to spend money on this.
I've reported to, I mean, pick a C-level title at one point. CEO, Chief Legal Officer, CIO, CTO. Everyone's got their own take on what it is that their expectations are. So, you know, from the communication perspective and keeping that in line, you just like Steve said, you know, you've got to have open communication. You've got to have the vehicles set up for the communication, and it's got to be two-way communication. It can't just be the business ramming something down your throat saying we have to get this out, and you've got to swallow it. And it can't certainly be, you know, I'm going to say no. You know, that's not our jobs as security executives anymore. Right. You know, a long time ago, it used to be, you know, they were expecting that. They were expecting you to come to you and you were going to tell them no, because there's risk involved. Well, now we've kind of, over the last 10 or 15 years or so, we've come full circle, and it's how can we make that happen for you? Right. What's acceptable to you? And from the senior executive perspective, what is you know, the acceptance of risk on that part? But you've got to be clear in conveying what that risk actually is. And a lot of that, you know, will slow down your timeline as to business implementation and things of that nature. But as long as you've got clear lines of communication, I think you're going to go a lot further than not.
So I can tell you what I think is going to happen. If you go back and look at Alfred Sloan's book, My Years at General Motors, an old book, go look for it either on eBay or Amazon or an old bookstore. Like go down to the Strand, you can probably find a copy. And the back of the book, he shows the org charts at General Motors, and through the book he shows the progression of org charts. It's like, awesome. And it ends in the early 60s, and if you look, flip through the org charts and go to the bottom, in the bottom corner, you find a little box that says Personnel Department. And it was two people with a typewriter, like typing your badge. Now what's happened, that Personnel Department has bubbled up over 50 years to be almost invariably a direct report position to the CEO, and they changed their name, upgraded it to Human Resources. So everybody's got an HR senior exec direct to the CEO. I predict if you graph where we've all been, I used to be that little box in the bottom corner, right, you know, running Dr. Solomon's on 6 computers, and then suddenly, for me, I became an officer, one of 100 people running a $180 billion company. That's going to happen, I think, to everybody. I think that information security, like a risk InfoSec thing, must be direct report to the CEO. Yeah. And I think it's just on a collision course. Yeah, so where you report now will change.
I totally agree, and couldn't have expressed that better than you had. But you know, I would take that one step further, and I would say it's going to be expertise that's required at the board level for many organizations. It's certainly in financial services, a lot of the regulations and requirements are going that way because, you know, after all, the intent of the board is to manage risk for the organization, and if we currently have people who can't consume this information to some level of accuracy and competency, we have to bring that skill set to the board. So we're starting to see that happen in some sectors. I think ultimately the role of the CISO and where it sits and how it's structured is not a kind of one-size-fits-all organization. Certainly myself, I report into risk. I've also reported into technology in the past. I've reported to corporate back office services. I think what's more important than where it reports to, it's what's the intent of that function and whether or not that's right for the organization.
What kind of concerns me is I work with a lot of organizations that don't have CISOs, smaller organizations, and it's usually the VP of IT or or even analysts, and they don't have a lot of elevated visibility, and they do the best job they can. And I think that's an area that is, God bless them, because they're obviously very vulnerable potentially, as opposed to the companies that follow better processes. Any questions before we go to on this? Before we go to question 2 over here.
I was wondering, how effective is it to go to senior management and present them with an actual breach that happens to a similar organization? And if that's not so effective, is there a way that you kind of tie it all together and bring it homes to really make them realize that it's not a it's not if, it's when?
Feel free.
I'll chime in on that fairly quickly.
So how effective is it when you have an actual breach to bring that breach to elevate the visibility of that breach and use that as, I'm assuming, a way to get more involvement, I suppose, right?
I think
Or
it's,
budget.
in my opinion, it's fairly effective at the board level. I used to include one slide for the board of, okay, these were the breaches that were reported, that they're going to hear about, right? Let's face it, a lot of folks on the board are not, IT guys, they're business guys. They know nothing other than what their kid gave them for Christmas, and and try and put that on the network when they come into the boardroom. So to have something that's relatable and it reflects what your posture would have been, even for a similar event, I mean, that goes a long way. It shows them that you're thinking about it. It enables communication with them, that you understand their concerns. They've got something in common with you as well, because they've heard about, okay, their debit card got returned or recarded back from because of a Target incident or something. Those are pretty effective vehicles at that level, but at the senior management level, if it didn't happen inside the house, they're probably not going to care very much, unless you can demonstrate, some sort of monetary loss and say, you know what, this concretely cost this company $35 million, and we're wide open to this, this particular venue or something like that.
What's interesting to me is when there's been an analysis done of all the big breaches, and the stock price goes down, and within a year the stock price is a good bit higher than it was after the breach. So the notion that it's going to hurt your brand seems to not be the case, and that always perplexes me. There's this general, people just don't seem to care, I guess.
Well, I think that's not necessarily always. This thing's a little off. It's not necessarily always the case, especially with a lot of your board members. They're not worried so much about the stock price as they are, the reputational risk involved.
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't want to get called out on the street from a buddy of of theirs that's on some other board that says, hey, look, this happened to you, X, Y, and Z. They don't want to risk that as well. It's just like you do something stupid and you see your friend 2 days later and he's heard all about that stupid thing that you did, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Also, just to add to that, I think that in the reality of the world we live in, where breaches are becoming a little bit more the norm, you get remembered by your response, not so much by the breach. And I think we're really seeing a lot of how people handle it well and poorly in the news.
Yeah, one just to kind of caveat on everything that's been said here, which I do agree with. I would also say, don't tempt yourself into selling every business case on fear.
Right.
So for me, it's if something significant has happened, and I'm talking, Home Depot, JP Morgan Chase, what have you. Yes, certainly, I'm going to hedge my bet and present that information, but don't try to make every business case, sold on fear. And I would say when you do present these instances where you are bringing that to the board or other senior management, don't focus so much on, hey, here's what happened, here's what went wrong. I would paint that picture in the context of, and here's what we're doing in the control space that failed for them that we have covered off, or
Exactly.
we have a similar control deficiency, and here's some of the options that we have on the table. Because if you just pitch the information, it's good information. I always like to try to sell a solution to the problem as well. So I'd bring all of that to the table and present it in a risk and control context rather than a doomsday context.
Ed, quick comments, and then also Peter, we haven't heard from you. I want to hear from you as well.
I think
Ed?
focus on them the sexy names first, because that's what they're going to remember.
I think that when you start to realize that these are executive decisions you're talking about, you realize that executive decisions are made between human beings who view each other as peers. Like this idea that you present some impeccable logic to a C-suite or board and they get it immediately and take action is false. The way things get funded are the same way bills get passed in Congress. They get passed, or things get funded through favors and deals. Sometimes there might be some capital sitting around that somebody wants to sell or get rid of, and you say, hey, I have a way to spend the capital, and boom, big program gets funded. Or you cut a deal with somebody. Hey, you need to go push this thing out. I'm saying it's a little risky. I'll give you a little on this, I'll give you a little on that. Like while you're at the Strand, go get Dale Carnegie's book, and you see that the way to influence people, the only way to get anybody to do anything is for it to be in their interest, and every human being is different.
Yep.
And you have to do, that's what an executive does. You read the team you're dealing with. Day one, you could have a team in front of you that would respond to your impeccable PowerPoint, and you read in the morning, organizational change, they're off doing something else, a new team is there, they don't care about your PowerPoint. So formulas don't work, relationships do. And if you want to get your stuff passed and you want to get your stuff funded, you have to build a relationship and go read like Dale Carnegie or something. I mean, I wish there was a better formula, but I don't think there is one.
That's correct. I'll piggyback right off of that because it is about relationships. I have different faces for different groups. Infrastructure, app dev. I got 3 different app dev teams, each requiring something different. I've got the board that I've got to prepare a presentation for every quarter. I've got the C-suite, so everyone gets a different face, and I'm negotiating and horse trading all day long. App dev, okay. An app that has to go in, business is on your back, you need to get that in this week, okay. Give me a remediation plan, but you can't have no more than 5 mediums and 2 lows, that's it. You know, but next time you're gonna owe me a favor and you're gonna go the mile to get me what I need. Infrastructure, you need to get some standards in, fine, we're gonna do some horse trading. I'll give you this, but you give me that. So it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I read my players, and I've got one analyst, and she's learned how to manipulate because that's what I taught her. You manipulate
Wrong
the heck
term.
out of them to get what you need. I don't care how you get it. At the end of the day, you get the job done. And it's a lot of manipulation.
Yeah.
But that's what security is because we're walking in every day. I've got a strategic plan to implement, but I don't know what's coming at me because all of a sudden, app dev is coming. I need to get this app in by Friday. It's Wednesday. Business, oh, we've got another audit request. You need to answer this. Another line of business, we need you in Jersey tomorrow morning for another audit. So you don't know what you're walking into, but I'm going to horse trade day and night.
Let me ask you, it's interesting because we've talked to a number of folks over the last week that couldn't make it because of audits. And how do audits impact your day to day? It seems to me it's a continuous audit. How does that impact you doing your job?
It's the best business partner you can have.
Right. I do great with audit. It slows you down, but the business relies on it. So I stop what I'm doing and I get those audit requirements back out to them because they're trying to win an RFP. They're trying to look right to the auditor. So audit takes precedence for me on top of everything else. I just prioritize differently. Let me take care of this. I can look at it quick and say, okay, this will take me 45 minutes, done, and I'll make up the time at the end of the day or some other time.
So it's a good thing.
It's a good thing, right.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, you know, in hindsight is always approached kind of negatively. For me, I don't know, I guess it's probably the best relationship that you could build in an organization. And, you know, for me, the more you can be transparent with them, typically the better your outcome's going to be. You know, I think, you know, historically, you know, there have been practices where it's like you kind of try to keep a lot of that close to the vest and then kind of let them, you know, audit their way through it and find the skeletons in the closet. But if you want a way to powerhouse a business case, get your, you know, your auditors on board, you know, let them know what your pain points are and why they're painful. And
I have a question we can segue to you, Ed. Over the years, a lot of folks to meet audit would buy the products and it would sit at shelf where they tell the auditors, oh yeah, we bought it, but it's going to take us months, potentially a year to deploy. Is that still a problem?
Well, so what I think you're talking about is the plan for a plan approach, right? Mm-hmm. So historically, you've been able to say, okay, yeah, we know that's a problem. We have a plan for it. You know, let's you know, go back. You know, oftentimes, you know, particularly whether it's coming onto a new organization or working with new business partners or during M&A or whatever, I always like to go back to the audit reports because that's going to tell you what the problems are. And I'm going to then look to myself and say, okay, it's been 3 years since we've done this audit. Do we have the same problems? And take a look at what those commitments are and use that as the yardstick.
And you do that obviously on a regular basis to
Yeah, I think a yearly review of your
See
audit
if
baggage
it's
is a good way to go. Not only what you have in flight, but what you've closed out to really measure, have you made those commitments? Because the one thing that I would not want is to, let's say in 2016, we have an audit, in 2017 we close out, audit findings and deliverables, and then in 2020 they execute the same audit again, I have the same problems.
Right, absolutely.
I think just to kind of add to that, is this on? Yeah, it's on, okay. Just to kind of add to that, don't be afraid of audit, right? If you don't know what you're doing, then be afraid of audit, because you're gonna have a never-ending laundry list of things to just, keep you busy. But I'd say don't be afraid of audit, invite them into your strategy, because a lot of the things that they're gonna find, you should have already found anyway. And that's going to support the execution of your roadmap. It's going to support the execution of your strategy. It's going to help you get the right funding. It's going to help you get the right visibility at the right levels. But if you have a successful relationship. If you don't, you're going to spend your life just doing check boxes and trying to dig out.
So because we have a panel, it might help to have an opposing view on this. If somebody had said they hated audit, I would agree with a lot of things saying here. So I'll give the contrarian view.
No.
You could make the case that telling the offense exactly how you're doing defense is a terrible idea. You could make the case that being reliant on audit to get funding is a terrible crutch. You could argue that it's a complete waste of time to inspect your house 18 times. Like inspecting it once is a good idea, inspecting it 18 times terrible. You could make the case that once you get the plaque on the wall, a creative idea to change your architecture is not going to be your favorite thing to hear when you just went through a big long process, you just cut the cake, and now somebody says, cloud what? Virtual data center what? That doesn't match. You could make the case that the whole thing is a bunch of bull crap, because every company that's gotten hit over the last 3 years, not only compliant, but world freaking class compliant. And I could go on and on.
I was going to segue to that.
So I'm just saying that if somebody else had said that, then I would have said, yeah, but there are a lot of good things.
Well, in some
so I'm just
ways,
providing a balancing.
Would it be harder to get budget? I mean, the reality is we all are aware there's a pretty broadening gap between.
Separating, if you can do it. If you can have the group over there dressed real well with business backgrounds getting their compliance budget, and then the group over here maybe a little more casual in jeans, more tech back. Like if you can keep those separate, that's a really good thing, because when you put them together, depending on your organization, let's say you work in a place that needs your regulatory authorities to be real happy with you because you want to go merge or do something, well then compliance is going to be the big goal, not because they want compliance, but because they want Washington to be happy with the company, and it's going to eat the whole place alive. So it's really awesome if you can have compliance and security like you have up here, separate. Just have them separate. That would be great. And then you have different budgets.
On the budget topic, I typically approach that with 3 categories. You've got your run rate, your minimum necessary. This is what I have to spend to keep the lights on. Typically because my background's in financial services, you've got your compliance and regulatory, and then the third is your growth and strategic projects. And each one of those not only requires a different level of funding, but I've found a different level of commitment, particularly at the senior management level. With security budgets continuing to balloon, right? It becomes difficult to explain away. How did you spend $40 million last year? Well, that's a pretty big, large nugget, and it does all these things to keep us safe and keep the lights on. But I think if you can kind of strategically, kind of bucket your budget like that, you can kind of pinpoint where a lot of that money is going, but also where a lot of the effort and cycles and what have you are going as well.
Yeah, I think with what you just said, Ed, it hits home with a lot of folks in this room with the being audited 18 times on the same thing. But I think that if you set up the right relationships and you have an open dialogue, I think you can cut a lot of that out. Where I've seen a lot of organizations get in trouble is they rely on basically audit to do their job and tell them what's wrong. You should know that. By being in the seat, you should know that every day. What's wrong with your organization, where your weaknesses are, where your blind spots are, and what your strategic plan is down the road in order to get those things.
To what extent do executives, what is their awareness level that just because they're compliant, they might not be secure? I mean, do they, and of course, if you get hit after you just went through all these successful audits and they say, what happened? That's obviously very common, but that gap is increasing. Are they aware that you have to go well beyond these days just to be just compliancy?
Well, I can tell you, in Washington, they don't get it. Like in Washington, there's three things Washington says we all need to do. Like if there was a group of members of Congress sitting here now looking at you, they'd say, look, here's your problem. One, you don't share information, as if like grandpa on the roof with a helmet and field glasses and a radio to everybody. I think I see a virus. It's like, is that what we really want? Come on, that's a crazy architecture. So they say that. They say we should blame some countries and tell them to stop. Like if they would stop, we'd be all right, so debate all that as if that's the problem. And then the third is compliance, because everybody here knows if you get yourself in some sticky situation, your penalty is, you know what the problem is? You don't have a compliance program. And you can go show them you have Archer, metric stream, 80 different, doesn't matter. You're going to get a compliance program because that in their mind, those are the three things you all do wrong. And you know that's not true, right? So I think more government than executives. I think, I don't know what you guys think, but I think execs kind of get it, but I know Washington doesn't, and he really needs some work
the
there.
executives really aren't focused too much on the 400-pound guy. So,
Till he says something.
Any questions before we switch gears? Right here.
Can you pass the
And
mic?
for anyone who would, thank you. And for anyone who would, for anyone who would want to answer.
Yolanda, turn it on.
There you go. And for anyone who would want to answer. After a penetration test and having to do with the remediation, you knew I was going to ask that, Peter. So I'm doing a survey because I want to create a question for one of the tests. And I'd like your candid opinion based on your experience or what you think is right. After the remediation, after the testing and to verify the remediation, who would you bring to independently test or verify the fixes were made?
Are you looking for the name of a?
No, meaning.
Oh, functionally.
Which functions would you? 2 or 3, to be exact.
Are we writing the question?
Yeah,
Or the
I know
answers?
exactly.
I've already given her my answer.
Okay. So for me, there's a couple problems with a pen test right off the bat. A, it's a snapshot in time. B, it's typically without any sort of context of the infrastructure, the business process, the asset supports, what have you. And the output of a pen test is an inherent risk rating. Okay, so for me, what the business has to do is take all of that information and funnel it down to what's the true risk, and then ultimately that would then dictate how we're going to respond. For example, if you have a medium risk vulnerability, okay, inherent vulnerability score on a high risk asset, what's the residual risk? Is it high or is it medium? So that's a question that the business has to determine. But for me, what you're talking about is the assurance function. And that is after you've done the risk assessment and you've done some sort of action, who's doing the assurance function? And to me, that's going to be independent of whoever's doing the testing. So I'm going to put it back on you and say it could be a third party. It could be somebody in a IT risk role. It could be somebody somewhere else in an assurance function. It could be kind of any one of those items, but to me it's going to be whoever doesn't have a stake in the game. I mean, that's the conflict of interest.
That's not always the way it was, though.
I think
I'm not saying that's the way it was. I'm
It's
saying
been more of a rubber stamp years ago.
Saying that intelligence, you would want to keep it inside, so then the organization would grow more security aware.
keep what inside?
Yeah, I
The
think
assurance.
I think that you're also there's who owns the assurance, but there's also who owns the overall issue. Ultimately, you're going to be the one on the hook to make sure that that stuff gets done. So however you're comfortable in assuring that, X, Y, and Z was remediated by, this particular date that you can show off on your checkbox and stuff. But like Steve said, I really don't.
Yeah, I'll
Pass off to. Go on.
I just want to clarify, and then I'll pitch it to you.
That's a good point.
This is the evolution of the CISO. So I've worked in organizations where the penetration testing function isn't in the CISO's organization. It's a front line. It's a first line of defense activity. The consumption of the technical vulnerability report and coordinating with the business, the remediation actions, the risk management lifecycle, the assurance function on the back end, that has sat within the CISO's organization. But this is why we see a shift from, notice how I said a CISO so far for me is a politician, an academic, and I haven't, said a technologist, because I don't think that's the highest ranking quality. So, again, it's not one size fits all for all organizations, but you have to have that independence.
I want to mention one thing and have to
I was
add-
just going to say, I don't think you should validate after, because it puts too much weight on a pen test. Now, pen tests are good when you need to convince somebody of the presence of an error, because every pen test produces a presence. Has there ever been a pen test in the history of ever that didn't? So you already know the answer. So if you have a pesky financial group that won't fund you, kind of a cool thing to do, pen test them and bring it in and go, look. Or if you're in a culture where there's not real good understanding of cybersecurity, then the shock value of a pen test is awesome. Bring the nastiest, most horrible pen test results ever in. But if you honor the results too much by following up and checking again, I want that checked every year. That's like, there's a bazillion cracks in the house, I found 3 of them. Check those 3 cracks versus, wait a minute. It shows the presence of a problem has nothing to do with demonstrating the absence of them. So pen test is great when you need shock value. It's terrible when you're trying to do assurance. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, and the unfortunate
the
truth
interesting
is,
thing that I've been seeing in the field is they're doing the pen tests, but they can't get to the vulnerabilities. They can't patch their web applications. They can't get to their websites. And those vulnerabilities, we're treading water. We're going in the wrong direction there. And it's pretty common. It's pretty broad. So how do you change that dynamic? Anyway.
Who can't get to the vulnerabilities?
Some of the folks that are managing, that are on the front line, that I'm talking to within the operational aspect, they can't get to this. They can't. The dwell time of those vulnerabilities, once they're identified, is getting even longer, even after they identify them. And that's, I'm just going by the sorts of.
I think in a lot of cases, there's not a lot that you can do to make somebody fix something until there's an actual valid consequence associated with that. Whether the consequence is going to come from, the upper echelon to say, hey, look, you know what? Last month your fuse was this long. This month your fuse is right at about that. This thing's about ready to blow because here's what's coming down the pike. Here's what we're seeing on the horizon here, and you're going to be in a world of hurt probably in another month or so. But
yeah, I mean, vulnerabilities are only one piece of the pie, right? I mean, you can have all the vulnerabilities that you want, but if you have no threat,
what's the risk?
You have no risk, right? So, I'm spending a lot of time focusing on, what's the organizational threat landscape look like? What are the likely, adversaries? What are the likely, TTPs? Things of that nature. What's the most likely scenario? Vulnerability scanning, pen testing, all of that. Great practices, pretty much foundational. Pen tests are a great compliance check. Regulators come in. What's your crown jewels? Have you tested them? Yes. Off you go. But I think you have to look more broadly, particularly when you decide with some of these legacy assets that you have. Are we going to rip apart everything in order to rebuild to check the box on a vulnerability on a pen test?
Let's segue to question 2, or if that's all right, and maybe start at that end of the panel. It's a great segue to just let me switch the page here. Sorry about that. What are you doing to test your incident response program? How many folks have formalized incident response programs here? Well, and so there's certainly a lot of folks that don't have formalized programs. What are some of the recommendations that you can provide to at least have a plan, albeit not formalized? And maybe you can just touch on what you do to increase your proficiency on that front? Maybe starting down at the other end with Ed.
Oh, you want me to start? So, I mean, I'll tell you what I really think, and then you guys can tell me if you disagree. But this idea that we should punt on stopping cyber attacks because now it's inevitable that you get hacked and it's all just incident response is not right. Like, come on, is it that hard to build systems that stop hackers? We're really punting on that? So, yes, you do need an incident response program. You know, it's a lot of nice vendors that'll help you. You should practice things and run through all kinds of different exercises. Definitely do that. That makes sense. It's prudent. But be careful not to let the astronomers take over. Like, astronomers have taken over incident response programs in a lot of companies. And the reason is astronomers couldn't get jobs as physicists. So they came to what we do. And astronomers lay on their back and look at the stars, or like little dots, and they wish they could move them around, but they can't, right? Their whole career, they're lay there and they can't move stars. So they come to our world and they look at maps of the internet and they think you can't move stuff, you can only respond. But you can, we're engineers, and change it. So be careful with this overemphasis on incident response. Like electrical engineers, if you had a broken board, would you build response circuitry around it to respond to the errors in the logic in your board? It's ridiculous, right? So I'm just saying, you got to have it, but step back and make sure you rethink before you start saying things like, well, it's inevitable we get attacked. Really went to the moon with computers the size of our calculators now. I think we can build enterprise systems, distribute them, virtualize them, fix them up. That'll stop cyber attacks, and you won't have to have all this response stuff. So that's what I think about incident response.
Any other comments on that?
We have an incident response plan. We test it once a year. This is the second year it'll be tested. But what I'd say, right, we're building systems that are more resistant, and the plan is there because we have to have a compliance.
Yeah.
We will test it again this month to make sure that the teams know what to do, but we're not relying on that. It's just you have to have it. But let's shut everything, the basics down. Let's patch and make sure the vulnerabilities aren't there.
Have their IR plans changed much in the last few years?
I've changed the IR plan, yes. I've made it more security-centric where it was more of a DR plan before. It's like, okay, you can't do that. It's got to be specific to security. And how do you react to the different scenarios, a virus outbreak, a phishing attack, things like that. So they'll learn and actually walk through it to be able
So you
to
can
respond.
prioritize it better. And,
Correct.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Insurance and audit. Auditors are looking for it.
Something I want to add to that, I have an incident response plan that gets tested also. But something I've done as part of that, and it's sort of to address this issue of over-focus on incident response, is that I've put on retainer companies that do this all the time. That way I'm not tormenting my internal resources into spending too many cycles on something that may or may not happen.
Yeah, I'm going to go right out and I'm going to challenge the statement, right? And everyone in this room has probably heard it at one time or another. Well, if you haven't been breached, you're going to get breached, or something of that effect. You got a much better chance of hitting the lottery, actually. I mean, go out, pick your 6 favorite numbers. Most people in this room are not going to be breached, right? And I also think the people that are not checking that fear, uncertainty, and doubt at the door are very much vendor related or very much research focused. And I think Gartner missed the whole IDS thing is dead by what, about 6.5, 7 years, right? So don't always just go on what, the whole pool of sheep or baba
What's
out
the
there.
definition of breach you're using, though, when you say that?
I'm using a material incident by, I'm not classifying,
breach.
like
Like a big,
yeah, I'm classifying something like
Make
your
the news
target
kind
or
of
make
thing.
the news, or even something from outside your
the
company.
make the news thing, I
Yeah.
agree with. I think that's right. Make the
Certainly not
news,
a
the other
breach,
part
it's
I
more
don't.
competitive.
It's not something as simple as everybody gets viruses inside their four walls. I don't consider that to be a breach.
Yeah, I would just kind of round it out with saying don't have an over-reliance on your incident response capability and replace that with complacency, under this idea that, something will happen and we're ready for it. But I would also say, because of insurance and regulatory requirements and what have you, you can't ignore it. You know, the OCC is expecting you to test upon it and all that good stuff. So I would say, you know, when you set down into this rabbit hole that we call incident response, you've got to clearly delineate what that means for your organization, and particularly with security, how does that differ from just like event management and event response? Because in my eyes, you know, organizations should have many, you know, security events a day, and you know, probably none from an incident perspective. But you know, my tip to you would be keep it as simple as possible. Don't overboil the ocean, because that, if you do have to go to the drawer and pull the plan out, gives you some flexibility as far as your response strategy. Because when it comes to insurance or you know, from a legal perspective, if you've created this, you know, SOP in this run book that's 100-page long, and it has, you know, 1,000 steps that you're going to do to respond to you know, a data breach, you better follow each one of those points. So I would say keep it, you know, generally non-specific. You know, is give yourself some wiggle room. I would also say that you know, make sure that you're integrated into your other response functions. So BCP, DR, physical security, all of that. You know, you don't want your cyber plan, you know, to be kind of like this left arm of a much bigger beast. Leverage those capabilities and resources, and just integrate into that, and you'll be fine. And then finally, just make sure that people know the escalation chain and how to manage the message if something does go wrong.
One thing I would ask you, you probably should contact your local members of Congress and DHS, anybody you have influence over, on the electric power incident response we have in our country. Like, if you read Ted Koppel's book, you might agree, disagree, but the point is valid that we have transformers around the country that, if fried by, you know, something that hoses up the safety system as you're building, you know, voltage ship across country or something, it takes 6 months to replace one of those things, and we don't have spares. So everybody in this panel would go, well, I have spare. Like, we all do incident response by practicing and having spare equipment and so on. Like, our own country has no spare transformers, and it doesn't even cost that much. Like, there's probably some influence in this room. Go grab somebody at DHS, or go get your local congressman and say, how come we don't have spare transformers here? Otherwise, like, remember anybody in New York during the outage here? Wasn't that creepy?
Yeah.
Like, how would you like to have that for 6 months, right? It'd be horrible. That's what we're headed toward. But there's no incident response. I mean, that's what that is, right? No response plan.
That's scary.
We had the power outage, but the beer stayed cold.
Question?
I just wanted to, leave a point about the, do you have a separate cyber incident response plan or cyber function or cybersecurity program from a normal information security program?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting semantical here. For, you know, I don't know, cyber and information security plan. I mean, for me, it's kind of synonymous. I think what's most important is having clearly defined boundaries and how your organization defines that. You know, to put you in a defensible position if something does go wrong. You know, why did you make the decisions that you did? You know, so you can define cyber however you want. Yeah. You know, that could include, you know, privacy and compliance things and what have you.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to see pillars. You know what I mean, like a
Yeah.
cybersecurity organization, cybersecurity plan, cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think there once was a time, a long time ago, when I heard the term cyber and I kind of wanted to throw up in my mouth a little bit. And I think most of the people who have been doing this for a while, you know, we've come to accept that, and now we can kind of like choke that back now.
But I also look at a SOC and a security operations center completely different than a cyber or information security incident management team or plan or protocol.
Question in the back, and I'll get you next.
Hi. When I saw the topic for this discussion, the future of cybersecurity, I thought about robots and flying cars, and we haven't talked about those. I spent a week last week at a Microsoft technology conference, and one of the big topics was machine learning and artificial intelligence. So I'm curious to know, you know, about the future. Where do you see the future of cybersecurity, and does any of that technology excite you?
That's a good segue, by the way, to how your roles are going to change.
I'll offer a point, as you probably gathered, more probably a contrarian viewpoint. Computer science is only about 50 years old, and it's not a science because it has to call itself one, right? So geology, math, those are sciences. Computer science is not. So at some point it'll become computing, and get the alchemy, the numerology, the astrology will all go out of computer science. And I fundamentally believe that artificial intelligence, a la the kind of stuff you saw on Twilight Zone episodes in the 50s and that you hear now, is the alchemy of computer science. And that you're not going to have a lot of these things. People are worried about, like, computers, you know, taking over Earth and taking over humans. That's craziness. I don't know where that comes from. I think that what will happen is the beauty of algorithm design, distributed algorithm design, and collecting data and heuristic analysis, that'll blossom. And these things that consortia of tech companies are doing, I think, for shock value, saying, "Oh my God, we have to be, you know, careful that we don't, you know, create humanoids out of machines." I think it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. So that's my viewpoint. I think computer science will spit that out as its alchemy, and we'll have algorithm design, which is mathematically sound, makes sense, and this idea of creating, you know, brain-like humanoid things. I don't personally think that makes any sense. And computer security will follow computer science.
I can add a little to that, which is that I think that one of the things that I think I want to be most sensitive about with technologies like that, with artificial intelligence and machine learning and all this other stuff we have going on, is really understanding the impact from a privacy point of view. Specifically, I know in healthcare this is a major issue that we need to focus quite a bit on. I know I use these technologies in their very simplistic form now for a lot of the work I do in the cybersecurity space. But I would disagree. I think Singularity is about 10 years out. So this is a warning.
I know, Cortana's still not making me a sandwich.
I think von Neumann was concerned about it in the 50s, like scared to death, wrote Computer in the Brain, actually died writing it, and had predicted a lot. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Like these intelligence from computing. Remember Dijkstra would say, you know, does a computer think? And he'd say, well, does a submarine swim, right? So it's like, depending on the semantics. I just think that a lot of the fear that people have, I don't agree with. I think we will control computing. I think it'll eventually be a science, and human beings will use it to make the world better, like we'll make the world safer. And I agree, I know we have information warfare, but I don't think we should fear the technology. I think we should fear human beings misusing technology.
I agree.
That seems like a more
100%.
reasonable,
Yes.
because it has gotten pretty sensational. I've sat on panels where I really had to bite my lip, you know, because everybody's going off on all this, you know, stuff, and I just go, oh my gosh. So I don't agree with any of that.
Another question over here. We're running out
Sure,
of time, so let's get more questions in.
This one, as part of the incident response team, one of the things I'm so tired of hearing that we're under attack. Have you ever thought about, again, going on the offensive after talking, let's say, in collaboration with law enforcement?
We can't go on the offensive. The laws aren't built for that.
No. Have I thought about it? Conceptually, is it a realistic discipline? I would say probably, probably not. I mean, I even would stretch that so much as like the whole concept of, private companies have sock puppets and offensive, threat intel and getting, engaged in Tor and the dark web is probably not a pragmatic approach to solve your problem. I think, what you have to do is just, quantify what is attack. If somebody's port scanning you, is that an attack? Yes or no? If somebody is intentionally targeting you and using certain, methods and tactics against you, then yeah, you need to be able to consume that, analyze it, and be able to respond to that.
Yeah, if you're talking about, some hired gun strike back type technology, I think that's a very bad idea. I think you're opening yourself up to a lot of liability. If you've got somebody who's going to assume that liability 100%, and you can, plausible deniability, I don't know anything about it.
Exactly.
You might get away with it.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this side? I know we haven't looked over here. Over here?
We're funny, Pete.
Oh.
Thanks for sharing your opinions. Governor Cuomo's remarks presented.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for sharing your opinions. Governor Cuomo on September 13th talked about the first in the nation cybersecurity regulations and the formalization of a requirement for CISO and mandatory reporting within 72 hours of breach and detection. And as I dig through it, there's a whole lot of areas of mandatory reporting to the board and things like that. And of course, you're all already doing it. But any thoughts on that?
Thoughts on?
We always have thoughts on things.
Well, clarify, thoughts on what? Please.
So, for a lot of us, when we look through, I think it was said well this morning that from an auditing point of view, the checklist, pass or fail, and where do you stand on your, NIST or HIPAA or gap analysis, things like that. But what they were basically talking about was a lot of, similar to one of the talks this earlier today, where they just talked about how Nick did at lunchtime, where he talked about getting everybody aware of cybersecurity, and he had a security manifesto for his company. Just how do you get it so that it's pervasive through everybody? Nobody's, figuring a way to get a USB to not be encrypted or things like that. And how do you isolate your admins? I mean, the regulation's very deep. Too much for a question at the end of the day. But have you paid attention to it? I know it's going to affect the insurance and insurance and banking.
Also trying to tie that back to you started with Governor Cuomo, so I was trying to figure out where the connection was.
So there's a regulation going January 1st, 2017, where you have, I believe it's 6 months or 90 days to implement. And then there's like data encryption in transit is, I think, 6 months, data to a year. Data encryption at rest is with 5 years. It's the life of the SAN.
For the large corporations in New York City, will pretty soon get a download from RSA for Archer on that. And then they'll do the paperwork to show that there's no gap. I mean, that's how this works, right? It would have been more effective to just say follow NIST or something, then at least there's not another one? Like, I don't know, right?
Yeah, it's something new, but it's old, right?
It's actually, I think, just one last point is, I think there is NIST out there, and NIST focused on the government, and this is basically trying to, the thing that's different about it is focusing on non-public data of consumers.
Everyone comes out with their little thing because the staffers say, well, we got to have something new.
Exactly.
So that's even more destructive because it just changes something a little bit, so they have this new thing, right? And when a home inspector comes to your house and you go around with the clipboard, that's what compliance should be. You do it once with somebody you trust, you do it right, and then you put the sticker on the wall, and that's it. And anybody who comes and says you have to inspect again,
that's not compliance.
They should have their sanity checked. Because that's great, you did it.
Well, until October 28th, you can add to the public comment.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like that's
It's really nothing new.
We have time for one more question.
I think 40 other states are currently doing it. You've got European privacy data directives. You've got, umpteen different, as Ed said, all basically saying don't run with scissors, right?
Right. That's exactly what they say.
Yes.
Last question.
If we could go into Q4, our evolving role of CISO and also the day-to-day, we'd be interested to know your thoughts, please.
Well, I'll start. I think the CISO is moving away from the tactician to somebody who's more engaged with the business, probably focused on risk management, and is there to provide, a good standard of due care for the organization as it relates to, cyber and information security.
I would definitely agree with that, 100%. We've got to be, risk management professionals. That's it in a nutshell. I mean, gone are the days where, when you come up through the ranks and, you start as a sysadmin and then suddenly you figure out how to break crap and you wind up over on the security side of the house only because you're breaking your own company stuff. So, the propeller on top of the head goes away and you start thinking a little bit more strategically, a little bit more business focused and business oriented, and you kind of graduate into that.
That's right.
So I think that's kind of the evolution and progression that we've seen so far.
Any other comments on day-to-day, future of day-to-day roles? Anybody?
Well, that's the thing. It's what you're saying, right? We kind of wear 4 hats, right? We do technology. We have to guard at the door, right? Keep everything out. We have to advise the business, and we have to keep on implementing our strategy. So we're wearing 4 hats, and that's day to day. You're doing all 4 of those things at the same time. There may be an imbalance at any point in time, but we're doing all 4 at the same time.
Thank you. Panel, thank you. I know we're wrapping it up, and I think there's a raffle. I'm going to defer to Guy on.
Yeah, if you don't mind staying.
Thank you, panel
Mr.
members.
Checkup.
Thank you.
Want to give you a mic? Yeah. Pete, stay here.
So did everyone have a good day today? Was good sessions, yeah? I would like to bring up the steering committee for the New York Metro Joint Cybersecurity Conference. If everyone who's on the steering committee come up here, please. Dawn, Joe, Cindy. These guys put a ton of work into making this a success. This is our 3rd year doing this. This is Dor. Come on. You don't understand how much work, how many nights we're on the phone, and then how much work it takes to do all the footwork, to do all the planning. I think this is a phenomenal job these guys did. The co-chairs, where's Tom Brennan's not even here yet. Where's Tom? So our co-chairs this year were Pete Rosario from ISACA Hartford and Tom Brennan from OWASP. And I think they did a phenomenal job.
I'd like to thank the committee members, right? Because they all put in lots of time, but they do it because they care about what they do, and they care about you as the members of the different organizations, okay? Like to get Tom in here. There he goes. There goes the, It's all happened because of Mr. Tom Brennan right there. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Great. So before the quick drawing, quick show of hands. How many people think we should do this again next year? All right, great. So with your professional associations that you may be a part of, please communicate that, right? Because our deal is to see if we want to do this again next year, which I think we want to do. But more importantly, it's kind of important to see if we have the volunteers and the people that want to make that happen. So, raffle. This is for the drone by just Tripwire. Okay, cool. Wow, there's lots of cards with bent angles and all sorts of cool stuff and textured cards. Ooh, I got that one. Carl Brown, must be present to win. Wow. Fantastic.
Oh, that goes back into
not for the next drawing, right? You can't win twice.
No, you can't win drawings, different drawings.
Different drawing. So yes.
Back into the goldfish. I'll take this.
Oh, that's different. Excellent. And the cool part is obviously we draw live, so you actually, it's random, right? Which is cool. Get your tickets. Got to be present to win. 718-179. Xbox One. There we go. Winner. Another Xbox One. Ta-da! 718-316. Vitali. Winner. And we have one more from our friends at Contrast. Again, big props to all our supporters that are here. Thanks for doing raffles and help make our event fun. This is for a Braven BRV1. What is this? Ooh, a wire? Nice. A portable wireless Bluetooth speaker. All right, let's see what happens. This one is by Eric Decker. Got to be present to win. All right, going once, going twice. Tweet Eric Decker, you just lost. Say again?
Isn't he on the Jets?
Maybe, I don't know. He's a director of network and information security and has just lost. Next speaker. Amanda D. Pfeil. Fantastic. All right. Yay! Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any Ferraris being raffled tonight?
No, that'll be after the Bugattis go.
Oh, the Bugatti, after the Bugatti.
The Bugatti rhymes.
They actually did that once at RSA. Of course, it was the model.
All right, well, that's it for us for this year. Look forward to next year. You will see a survey come out to you in email with a link with a few quick questions. If you don't mind, please help us for the next year's content, next year's program, and of course, if you want to participate. So again, thank you.
And I'll just say that I've recorded all the other rooms, and it'll take a few days, maybe by next week. They'll be up there on the link, the live stream link.
Please bring surveys up to the front, please. Surveys up to the front, please. Thank you.
As Bill said, he's the oldest one here.
I don't know that.
But I'm behind him, but I've been practicing longer than some of the people, than many of the people who are here, before some of the people that are here were born.
Well, I could probably say that.
That too,
Yeah.
I go back to punch cards in college.
Yeah, I guess I don't